Good evening and welcome to Q&A live from the Roundhouse at the University of New South Wales. I'm Tony Jones, here to answer your questions from the Festival of Dangerous Ideas. Pop culture critic Chuck Klosterman, the author of But What If We Were Wrong? Sex educator Nikki Goldstein on the brave new world of sex robots. Social commentator and online warrior and playwright Van Badham. Performer MMA Gibson, the creator of Obscene Beauty Queen and sex clown Betty Grumble. And Professor of Artificial Intelligence at the University of New South Wales, Toby Walsh. Please welcome our panel. Thank you very much. The author, Angela Nagel, who is going to join our panel tonight, is unwell and we wish her a speedy recovery. Q&A is live in Eastern Australia on ABC TV, iView and News Radio. And our first question comes from Anne Carrington.
Hi, I have a question for Nikki Goldstein. I was wondering if you think that sex robots are a true solution for those that struggle to form intimate relationships, or are they simply just an avenue for avoidance for those who struggle with social anxiety?
Well, I'm glad that we're starting off with the sex robots. I think a bit of both, because I do feel like there are people who really do struggle to have these intimate connections. And I've interviewed people before that go to brothels and they feel that the only way that they can have this girlfriend experience is to be paying for it, and they don't necessarily want to be there. Now, when I think of sex robots and where we're going with AI technology, I feel like that's the perfect person that would really benefit from being able to feel like they have some form of an intimate connection without having to go to the local massage parlour or brothel.
Well, assuming they've got to spare $10,000 to spend on a sex robot.
It's not exactly a cheap thing. But also,
Is it just for rich misogynists?
At the moment, it is just for rich misogynists. But what I do worry about is that, are we going to get people who we can help establish intimate relationships with human beings, but because we have a tool such as a sex robot, which may be used as a therapy tool in the future, are they going to say, well, I don't necessarily need to go through therapy, or I don't necessarily need to try and learn how to have these intimate relationships. If I've got my spare $10,000, well, maybe I should have a sex robot. And further from that, is it such a bad thing that somebody does have a relationship with a sex robot?
Now, you've actually been to have a conversation, if you can put it that way, with a sex robot. I presume it was platonic.
It was platonic, but I did go hunting around the rooms to see all the different bits and pieces and all the different attachments that you can get.
What kind of attachments are we talking about? Just to get this on the table, as it were.
Well, when you create the robots, they start off as a live doll. So that's the current thing that we're seeing in the market of, the sex doll. They do have various gaps in the genitals where you can choose the different type of vulva that you would like, or the different type of penis. They did show me that they have flaccid and erect, because you might not want to be carrying around your sex robot with this erect penis. Not to say that you carry them around at the supermarket. You can get converters as well.
So you do actually have to carry them around, do you? Because, you can't imagine them sort of wandering around your living room with a martini.
No. I have seen one in China that does this with her arms. But my question was, I don't understand why this movement with your arms is necessarily beneficial in the bedroom. So you do have to physically carry them, which is why some manufacturers are starting to look at making them smaller, which starts to get into a little bit of a scary territory as to the size and what they're doing with them.
Well, that's actually outright creepy, is it? I mean, are we talking about sort of some kind of pedophile bot?
Well, this is the problem, is that we are hearing these things called pedo bots that do exist. And I went to China recently, and I went to a sex toy trade show, and I saw some of these dolls which did ring alarm bells for me, because they were smaller in stature. They were very cute looking, which was explained to me was not for Western cultures, which was for Asian cultures. But for me, it looked too much like a child. And I questioned the person that was selling them. And I said, well, is this a child doll? Because my immediate reaction was, hang on a second, this is not right. What they said to me was, because it had the presence of small breasts, that's how they were saying that, no, this is actually an adult, it's just in a smaller size. So I do very much worry about how people are getting under certain boundaries with that by saying it's just a matter of making them smaller, and it is a scary issue when we start to look at pedobots in general.
I think Van's expression sort of spoke for itself. But what do you think about this whole concept? I mean, the latter part of it, dark, actually, but what about the general idea?
Well, I think we have to just be adults and accept that as long as there have been people, there's been some form of sex robot or sex toy or sex object. There's a great episode of Family Guy where the stupid son makes a sex robot out of a pumpkin and some brooms that his mother mutilates with an axe. There's I once knew a guy who worked in an obscene objects collection at the Edinburgh Museum, and he was this expert in telling you if the object you brought in was obscene. And we have objects going back to antiquity that serve this function. So a sex robot is just, more detail on your basic, beginner model of sexual toy friend. The issue that I have is where these sex robots occur in the conditions of modern patriarchy and the potential for them to become a vehicle for greater objectification of women and greater acts of misogyny. One of the issues that we have around the sort of modern malaise of depression amongst men, resentments and anger about a lack of sexual fulfillment comes from a communifying, essentially, of people's lives and experiences. You have this phenomenon in Japan of people getting older and older without having sexual relationships, without forming partnerships or families, because their lives are dominated by work. And the kind of work we do is very atomised and very individuated. And it means that, as we move towards certain automations, that notion of human contact is being taken away from us. If you provide somebody with a sex robot and go, here, you can have this instead of a relationship, you're furthering that loneliness and that sense of isolation. And yes, you can project all kinds of qualities on that robot or that doll or that inanimate object, but it is still not human, and it still does not overcome that fundamental loneliness.
You're going to have to pause so I can go to someone from the modern patriarchy. And Chuck.
The representative of the patriarchy. Okay.
Let's see. Well, so what do you think about this? I mean, one of your things is to look at pop culture and Westworld, for example.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about sex robots, and that does make people, I think of Westworld. And Westworld is interesting in the sense that the show immediately introduces a premise for the program that these people can go to a fantasy park where obviously the first thing they'll want to do is be a rapist cowboy. It seems to think that would be the first thing anybody. No one questions how weird that alone is. That the premise of the whole thing is based around that this would be the normal reaction to.
Virtually no one wrote about the series in those terms.
It didn't seem that way. Yeah, well, there's a lot of other strange things to write about, but that one was kind of glossed over. There are many questions about this that are interesting. I mean, like you say, some of the robots seem small. Are they giant sex robots? 11-foot sex robot.
If there's a need for it, someone's going to create it.
It's hard to understand what the need would be, but yeah.
Chuck, if you had one in your house, where would you keep it?
Where would I keep the sex robot?
Yeah. Well, I was wondering, do people keep them in cupboards, or do they sit in the living room and watch television all day? I mean,
a cupboard would be, that's a pretty small sex robot then. That would be odd, because unless...
Depends on the size of your cupboard, Chuck.
I guess that's true, That would seem more like kind of I don't. You were saying you got to carry them around. No wheelchairs for the sex robots. We carry them over the arm like potatoes. What?
I thought they might have those sort of wheeled things like you use to pull kayaks around, but I wasn't sure.
And would there be laws about what one can do to the robot, or would it be free? Because would we, especially if AI gets involved, does the robot have agency? If the robot is able to sense that it exists for the purpose of sexual gratification, you would think it would be able to then sense things like fear and alienation and all these things.
You know what you've done? You've given the perfect opportunity to throw to our artificial intelligence expert, Toby. I know that you haven't talked regularly about sex robots and artificial intelligence, and maybe it's a bit scary to talk about it, but where will it go? If, for example, if a sex robot had agency of some sort as an artificially intelligent creature?
Well, I must admit, I've never, ever talked in public about sex robots, but I realised when I signed up to come on the show tonight that I was probably going to break that silence. And I think they're a very dangerous idea. The darkest part, in some sense, of our sexuality is what's happening in the privacy of our mind. And it's not, the fact that they're physically going to be a more realistic representation of the real thing, whatever that is, but it's the fact that they're going to mess with our minds. And if they really are smart, that is going to take us to a very dangerous place. And the sorts of relationships we might build with machines like that is one, I think, that will really start to corrupt our society.
Emma May, what do you think? You built an avatar, and you're partly dressed as your avatar, Betty Grumble, tonight, which we're pleased about because we get a bit of a chance to see you and the real person behind you as well. But what would Betty Grumble, who describes herself as a sex clown, think about the competition from sex robots?
Betty would feel like expressing that before we start manufacturing sex robots, we might heal the shame that prevails within our sex work industry. Because how sex workers are treated and the shame around that is really ungroovy and not very progressive. So I don't know if we can dish out the dolls yet before we heal that. I don't have a lived experience of being neurodiverse. I'm sure there are people that don't want to interact with humanoids, so that they may benefit from it. But yeah, I'd be interested in sex worker rights as human rights.
One of the things they could theoretically do is put some sex workers out of business, because in Houston recently the council just decided to not allow an application to have a sex robot brothel, but there is one in Spain. And there may be more being built around the place.
Yeah, I mean, it's a playful thing. It's an imaginative thing, and that's cool. But I would also wonder whether they're sustainable, compostable, recyclable beings as well. And yeah, the AI thing is like, how do you, if we're creating these intelligent beings and they do become intelligent, how does consent work there?
Well, I don't think there's an answer to that, but we do have another question from Georgia Grace. Georgia?
Hello. To carry on from that, one of the claims to support the use of sex bots is that people can learn about this sexual expertise and practice this sexual knowledge, but in no point in that is there the awkwardness or the clunkiness that often comes with real-life sex, the negotiation of consent and of boundaries. So at what point does this become dangerous for real-life sex and real-life relationships?
Georgia, stay with us, because I know that you are a sex educator and an intimacy coach, and we want to hear back from you in a minute. But Nikki, what do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I think we're talking a lot about sex robots, and what we need to make very clear is that sex robots are very different to human beings. And it's not up to scratch at the moment where you feel like they are replacing us. When you touch them, when you talk to them, it is a robot. Now, at the current state of technology, I look at this as a fetish. And for a lot of people who do sexually desire a sex robot, we may be looking at technosexuality and people that actually desire this idea to have control and this person, this thing, that is completely there for their pleasure. Now, I know a lot of people freak out about that and think, well, hang on, what are we teaching people? Are we teaching them not to engage in consent? Are we teaching them to degrade women? We also have male sex robots as well. They're into production just as much as we now have Harmony, we now have Henry. So I would think that it's a rite of passage for people, and it's a part of experience to be able to learn the awkwardness and the consent, because you can't do consent with a robot. There was an interesting article that said even if we were going to program these AI bots to say no, what's going to happen? Is a gate going to come down when the robot says no? You can't, at the moment, you can't physically stop that. Somebody can override that technology. But I look at it from a perspective of if I was having to teach somebody to put on a condom, if I was teaching them about anatomy, if I was teaching them, can we program these robots to be able to have some sort of interaction? You still need to have those experience and have that education with a real human.
Let me just go back to Georgia. And what do you think would be the results of someone whose first or only experiences had been with robots, who then meet a real person?
Well, I see it in a lot of the people that I work with, and it mirrors their experience with porn, that particularly in a lot of heterosexual relationships, women are speaking to me about these crazy sex moves or these crazy demands that they've had from the men that they're sleeping with as a result of what they've seen in porn. So I can imagine it could be quite similar, that if there was the opportunity for someone who has only had interactions with sex bots to then have sex with a real human, that it wouldn't be fulfilling. It wouldn't be the negotiation of consent or discussion of pleasure for both people involved.
Okay, Van, what do you think about that? And actually, you mentioned earlier that group of men who describe themselves, they didn't put it in these terms, but there's a group of men who describe themselves as involuntary celibate, incel.
Yeah.
Some might say this is a way of helping them.
In my experience of incels on the internet would suggest that this would be a way of encouraging them to further demonise and target women. And in that way, the broader conversation here is about conversation. It's about using a tool, which is what a sex robot is, that can be an object which a sex educator, an intimacy counsellor, a couple, can have a negotiation around sexual behaviour and, performance of techniques if that's important. Personally, the history of awkwardness around sex and its very human quality is one of the things I find really exciting about it. The idea of sort of coming to sexuality fully formed, I think you've missed some of the most fun parts. But that conversation, I think, is really important. And I absolutely agree with Emma May that the idea that people are more comfortable with people from marginalised communities performing intimacy with sex robots than they are with providing human rights to sex workers and recognising that sex work is work is a real testament, I think, about traditions of misogyny and the idea that we have people in the community who do not sell their bodies, they sell a service. There is a conversation around that involves human beings negotiating boundaries and behaviour. And that's actually a really powerful and useful conversation for us as broader humanity. A robot in isolation, like porn in isolation, like I said before, driving this further separation of individuals from other people and from sexuality, that is what is dangerous.
Chuck, what do you think?
Well, I mean, we're kind of discussing these in very optimistic terms, like the idea that somehow these sex robots would be principally a way to educate people about sex in their lives. I don't know if that's really how it would operate in practice. I mean, it's like, you could look at pornography and say, well, this is a way for a young person to learn about sex before they experience it. That's not the main reason young people look at pornography. You could say that the greatest thing about drugs is that it allows you to experience different kinds of reality and sort of learn more about yourself. That's not the main reason people take drugs. It seems to me that if these things become something that a typical person can acquire or purchase, like they're not so far out of the price range that no normal person has any experience with it, the utility will just be people want to have sex without any of the other problems that surround it, like having to meet someone or having to convince them to want to be with you or with the repercussions of what your relationship will mean. I think it will just be a way for people to say, I want this thing that I always want, but I want it to be simple. And I don't know if there will actually be a lot of thought about the meaning of this for the consumer. I think it'll be a product,
Yeah, there is a kind of sex test pilot guy, Nikki. The manufacturers of these things obviously have to work out whether they work and whether people can use them, whether they're fit for purpose, I suppose is the best way of saying it. Who is this person?
Well, I actually asked everybody in the factory when I was there, and I said, have you actually used the dolls? Because I was really fascinated as to their own experiences with them. They were artists and they really look at it from an artistic point of view, and also the creator is really into the AI. So there is a fantastic video where a guy who is known to have this crazy collection of sex dolls, I can't remember exactly how much, but when you see the footage, it's like he's got his own little army. And he has an apartment in Europe, and for a few months every so in the year, he's allowed to go over there and live out his fantasies with his sex dolls. So they actually brought him into Realbotics to have a conversation with Harmony to test out the AI. And it's very interesting when you look at this as a married man.
Just talking.
Just talking, okay? It was just actually having a look, because on the sexual side of things, it's no different to the current real dolls that you can get. So that hasn't changed. There aren't things that move and it isn't lifelike. And that's where you can really prove that point, that we're not looking at something that can replace a a human being.
Let me just ask Toby about that. Is there a future in which you could imagine artificial intelligence plus the technology that goes with this could actually produce something that is like a real human being?
Yes, 100%. They will be indistinguishable from the real thing eventually. In 50, 100 years. I don't know how long it's going to take, but eventually they will be indistinguishable.
And this is a world you find, you don't want to talk about it much, but you find it scary, obviously.
Yes, because we're wonderful, because we're human, and we don't have any need to replace us as humans. We want machines to do the things that we can't do, the dull and dirty and repetitive things, and let us focus time being with other people. We're social animals at the end of the day.
Okay, we're going to move on. Next question's from Flick Schemmer. Hi, Flick.
Hi. Are incels and men's rights movement simply cultivating their own culture of loneliness, toxicity and depression? Or are they banding together because of societal pressures? And could there possibly be a space for sex bots to be provided for free for them to have some sort of relief?
Yeah, Van, I'll start with you. The incel movement we were just talking about, but there's a broader context to it, isn't there?
There is. There's a broader context to it, which is the ancient competition for status in society and competitions amongst the disempowered, the marginalised and those feeling excluded from the procession of history and trying to claim their status. And when you look at the incel movement is very specifically a reaction to feminism, where you have these communities of men who don't have the economic promise of the generation of their fathers or their grandfathers, who aren't entering into a world full of secure jobs or permanent careers or vocational opportunities, who live a very unstable economic and social existence, whose ideas of what masculinity is have been informed by different cultural eras where men could wake up in the morning and be inherently superior legally, electorally, economically to all women and always had the comfort of that status.
It's interesting, online it's kind of split, isn't it? Because you've got on the one side, you've got the involuntary celibate guys, and then on the other side, but both of them sort of soaked up into the alt-right, you've got the
pickup artists,
yeah, PUAs as they call it.
Yeah, and I go undercover in the manosphere all the time because these people came on my radar when I started getting active on Twitter and started writing for The Guardian. All of a sudden, I found myself subject to the most extraordinary hate that I'd ever encountered. And usually when I do this show, I'd actually get a friend to go through all of my Facebook comments and mentions and Twitter and delete things that are threatening to rape and kill me. Like that's, often my my Q&A Twitter and Facebook experience. But these communities are really interesting because, like I said, they're about a competition for status. And it reminds me the paradigm of the fact that most of the young men who fought for the South in the Civil War in America were not slave owners themselves, but they went to war to defend slavery because it was so important to them that there was a class of people beneath them, and that while slaves existed and they weren't slaves, they would have that surety. And I see a lot in common with the kind of men who are attracted to those extremist communities. And they are extremist communities. They are in many ways because we have seen acts of violence from these communities, communities that inform acts of violence and terrorism. They are listed as hate groups by lots of different organisations because an ideological conviction has taken hold as a zealotry that if those feminists dare exercise the potential to realise equality in communities, that shred of superiority that they hang on to, which is, their masculinity or what they think masculinity is, will be taken from them and they will become the disempowered. And that makes them incredibly dangerous. And of course, these people have always existed amongst us. There are always extremists in a population. But before the internet, there were impediments on them organising.
We're going to come back to talk about them on the internet. MMA, are you aware of this concept of the manosphere?
The manosphere. I've heard it, the manosphere.
See, the guys who occupy this manosphere, they seem to be transgressive. Yeah. And of course, you are transgressive, but in a completely different way.
Yeah. Are they transgressive or are they just like the volume turned up? I am definitely disturbed by these incels. They're a problem, but we have a problem with men, with the institution of men, with power, and I would be more disturbed by the smiling assassins of the patriarchy that are within our current government and within the web of tyrants that maybe enhance the ability for these men to feel more powerful or do more hating.
We've got Malcolm Turnbull on Thursday, so we'll get a chance to talk about smart.
You can ask him right about the manosphere. He knows all about it, yeah.
Let's move on. Remember, if you hear any doubtful claims on Q&A, let us know on Twitter, and keep an eye on the RMIT ABC Fact Check and the Conversation website for the results. The next question comes from, I'm not sure who it comes from, actually. It comes from Ariza San Miguel.
Hi.
Ariza, I beg your pardon.
Yeah. The internet is a portal used by both the far right and the far left of politics. Is there a key difference between how the far left and right use it to communicate their agenda? Also, is one more effective than the other?
Chuck, what do you think about this? The alt-right has gathered to itself tremendous power in the United States, and they see part of that power coming from the agency of the president.
It certainly seems that way, doesn't it? I mean, it certainly feels as though that they've been emboldened by this idea that even if the president doesn't directly support them because he does not denounce them, that he is latently seeing that as a unit of support. I mean, the question's kind of interesting. How do they use the internet differently? I mean, it's just, I mean, the principal thing that ties it together is that kind of what you were saying about the incel movement. It's sort of impossible to imagine certain of these factions having existed in, say, 1992 or whatever, because it would be very strange to self-identify as an incel in the real world. I mean, even if somebody had these ideas in their mind, it would seem strange to say, go to a bar and try to find other people who shared this identity. It's very strange. I mean, this is what I think is the disturbing thing about the internet. Many things are positive about it, of course, but it is strange how these fringe ideas can not only be amplified, but be then further amplified by their coverage in the media, in the sense that it makes it seem as though, like you say, like the alt-right in the United States, I don't know how many people are involved with that. You know, what's the actual number of U.S. citizens who are involved? There's all these different estimates, but no one really knows.
The really surprising thing was to see them come out on the streets in Charlotte.
Sure,
and
yes.
Of course, because the president came out immediately and said, well, there's a problem with both the alt-right and the alt-left.
Yeah.
And
well, he was just saying, like, bad people on both sides.
Yeah,
that was kind of his take, which was, you know, it's a complicated thing, because I do feel as though the internet now is shifting everyone's sense of reality by sort of the most bombastic ideas are the ones that get the most attention and therefore seem more central to the experience of living and the experience of life. And I feel a real distance between the world I see on my computer and the world I live in.
Yeah, Van, going back to the question, who uses the internet more effectively, the alt-right or the alt-left, if you could put it that way?
Oh, look, the President of the United States, I think, is a product, well, his election is a product of a certain moment in history and a number of dovetailing factors. One of them is that a certain group manipulated the media tool that was at its disposal highly effectively in a context where in the United States you have communities that have broken down. I get back to the economic situation of people is very insecure. You know, social roles and models of living are collapsing. And in the United States of America, you have a highly fragmented and divided working class. You don't have a unified trade union movement. 40% of union members in the United States voted for Trump because he was promising, with no evidence to support it would happen, the jobs would be held in America and communities would continue to exist and the factories wouldn't close. And of course they all have. And the modest gains of Trumpism, by the way, in jobs are being and income are being cancelled out by the fact that inflation is rising a lot faster than incomes are, and the situations are still very, very fragile.
Okay, but we're talking now specifically about the use of the internet.
Specifically about the use of the internet. Like my hero, Abby Hoffman, you can look him up, said that the modern revolutionary heads for the television station, and that political organising and the power of movements is something you can affect through culture because you represent your ideas in your discussions and the energy of your movement that way. And like I said, in terms of right-wing organising, they have the medium to organise in the way that they didn't used to. And that's been very effective for them to hide their numbers in many ways. Like if you looked at my Twitter feed without a filter on, you would think that the world was full of like intense neo-Nazis, radical misogynists, because they're attacking me constantly. But one of the reasons I know they're attacking me is, you know, I am a hard left person. I have explicit socialist politics. I obviously don't support violence. I enter my views into a public realm where they are discussed and they're processed through traditional media. I don't think somebody like me existed before the internet because I was filtered out of mass media and I couldn't build an audience.
MMA, do you have this experience, by the way? Do you get these kind of attacks on social media?
Oh, little troll dolls.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, this is a war mask. Betty Grumble was a totem critter created by myself, MMA Gibson, as initially a war mask to respond to a world that tells us there's only one way of being and respond to bodies, often male bodies, that felt that they were entitled to my woman body. So it was a response to that entitlement, and now it's become more of a love letter. And I have had those engagements in real life, as out of the mask and in the mask. And what I remind myself is that it says more about the person. And, you know, the mask acts as an agitator. When these trolls come out, they're saying more about themselves than they are about you. But the cruelty...
Does the mask work, though? I mean, is it effective as a defence?
As a defence, yeah, it's like a caterpillar's bottom sometimes. Yeah, look, the mask is... Yeah, the mask... look, 90% of the time, it's total love energy. Right? It's people recognise the vibration and the frequency that I'm putting out and the humour. And the Grumble mask is a healing balm. It's what I've used as my tonic against that violence, the violence of arrogance that we're struggling with as a society. And I know that I'm in the left. I'm left-leaning. I'm green. And we've got our problems, but right-wing people... The right want to control bodies. We want to liberate bodies. And I know that violence is being done within the left, and I do not condone violence, but it might be self-defence.
Toby, you've obviously spent a good deal of time contemplating the internet, its uses and the worst aspects of it. What about the use of it to actually garner support for different political views? And the questioner asks, you know, who's the most effective at doing that?
Well, it's disappointing. I mean, the dream that we started out with in the Arab Spring, the technology being used to give people voice and to, you know, promote democracy has been badly distorted and badly perverted away. And whilst we can be critical of the alt-right and the people on the alt-left, I think we also have to be critical of the tech companies. You know, it's their algorithms that are filtering the news and giving us the filtering those things up to the top. It's, you know, Facebook that was selling adverts to Cambridge Analytica, and they have not taken responsibility. And that is helping to promote these voices, the voices that we are distorting the political debate and making it so corrosive today. So I think we have to call the tech companies into account.
Are the algorithms unethical?
The algorithms have no ethics. The algorithms have the ethics of the people that write them, and the algorithms are just bits of maths. And so we have to really call into account people and say, you need to be responsible. You know, the biggest media organization on the planet today is Facebook. It's not a media company anymore. They provide most of the news to people, and we have to probably hold them to the same sorts of standards we hold the ABC to.
I was thinking about how nervous we should be about algorithms controlling our lives, and then I saw this story about how the Chinese are doing it with this thing called the social credit system, by which every one of your social media engagements, everything you buy, if you purchase too much alcohol, too much tobacco, it raises or lowers your social credit. And that causes your life to has influences on your life. Also, who you talk to and what you say about the government influences your social credit. Orwell could not have dreamed this up.
He couldn't. I mean, Orwell got one thing wrong. It's not Big Brother. It's not people watching you. It's computers watching you, and they can do it far better on a far bigger scale than people can do. And it's terrifying to see what is happening in China. to see how if you have the bad friends, then you will have a bad rating. You won't be able to go and buy a long-distance train ticket. You won't be able to send your kids to the right schools. You won't be able to buy a flight out of the country. And it is worrying. It is really Orwellian what they are going to do with that. And then what they're doing with face recognition, they have a system, just in case you're concerned what it's going to do. It's called Skynet.
Right.
It can scan 1 billion faces.
So that's the Terminator for anyone who doesn't.
Yes. It can scan 1 billion faces in a second. It can scan the population of China in a second, and they're using it already to suppress religious minorities. And what you can do with that. And if you think, oh, it's all right, we're in Australia, we can sit back and relax. Well, our government has just decided they're going to build a national database, and everyone's passport photograph, everyone's license photograph, all of your biometrics is going to be in that database for national security purposes.
Still not a social credit system, just a credit rating system, which we all have to be subjected to. Chuck, are you scared by this future that we're talking about?
Yeah, but I would be scared by the future regardless of what it was. The future always seems, it's like there's all these books and films always have been about the future dystopia. It's always a dystopia. If we're moving to a utopia, that's the trick. It's the dystopia. It's like that's all it is, right?
Yeah.
So I don't. It just seems crazy to be like, well, I'm sure, the more we use technology and sort of the more we distance ourselves from the organic experience of living, I'm sure that'll be better, right? I mean, I'm sure we'll all be more comfortable. There's no way that will be the case, Yeah. But then at the same time, I always think, well, everyone's always thought this, right? I mean, I'm sure.
But fears about dystopia in the 1930s proved to be quite well-founded.
Well, it's just like all the things people said television was going to do to people. They were all seen as sort of reactionary ideas. They all kind of happened. It's like I know this makes me just seem like a crazy person, but part of me is always like, well, all technologies are good in the short term and problematic in the long term. And I know that's not, that's a kind of a dark way to think about this, but I feel that way sometimes, that everything that we create has this immediate utility that improves our life, okay? But for every generation that comes after, a computer is a crowbar. It's just something that exists there. And its utility changes. Now,
I hate to be the scientist here, but life expectancy in Australia has doubled since the Industrial Revolution. Our quality of life has improved immensely. The probability that you're going to die a violent death has decreased dramatically.
Absolutely, but if the expectation of your life was that you were going to live 45 years, you would say, oh, hey, maybe I'll make it to 50, okay? The perception now that a life has to be the length that we expected, that is the expectation that we exist within. I mean, it's reductionist to say everything is relative, but in a way it is. It wasn't like when life expectancy was in the 40s that people were like, man, we should really be living till we're 80. This is crazy. They didn't think that way. I mean, we only have a sense of the world we understand. So the quality of life, I would not want to go back in time. I would not want to live in the 1840s and be like, oh, well, it's great not having a bathroom or whatever. But at the same time, I do think that whatever experience you have becomes normal. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but at one point, a few years back, my life expectancy of males born in my year was increasing 1 year for every year. I mean, that's a trend that could go on forever as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, yeah.
And the quality of our life.
We've got a hand that's just gone up in the audience, and we did call for comments, so go ahead.
Yeah. Toby is talking about open government, our new open government, and you were just talking about China. Our open government is giving us exactly the same, or our government exactly the same tools that the Chinese government will have. They will have every bit of data of us in one place that could easily be stolen by foreign agents or used against us in time. And even the sex bots, remember the AI will probably be in a centralized sort of Google or Facebook or even managed by our own government. So our whole life could be controlled through our open government.
Talk about dystopia, and we'll take that as a comment. And Nikki, what do you think about that? I mean, we haven't heard from you on the subject of this kind of dystopian future we've been talking about.
So my worry is when we're looking at control and sex robots, is that when we continue on to developments of AI, who controls what data? if you are interacting with this robot, if you are talking to it, because currently at the moment you talk to the robot, it retains your information, it learns, it spits back. Now I think as we progress, I become fearful in that aspect of if a company is developing this bot, under what legislation who are they answerable to? Who's buying that data? Is then Facebook buying that data to be able to learn more about us on a sexual basis and use that to whether they're pushing something as an agenda? Is it advertising? Will porn companies be able to tap into what we're doing with these robots to be able to learn what is the most common thing that we want to do in the bedroom and then start producing that in mass? So it does become...
Or start blackmailing people.
Well, there is that one going around at the moment. I think you've got to pay someone $500 if you're caught looking up porn, but who's not looking up porn these days? So it does become scary as to who's going to have this information and what they're going to do with it.
Okay, you're watching the Q&A live from the Festival of Dangerous Ideas. Remember to join us on Thursday for an especially dangerous Q&A with the former Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull. Now, the next question comes from Samantha Chabot.
This one's for MMA. So for the past 13 weeks of my final semester at uni, I've actually been able to take a class that focuses on dangerous performances and what transgression can bring to a performative space. And we actually had the opportunity to look at your work. So I was wondering, how do you believe your work actively engages the body to enact transgressive ideas? And what do you think we can do to activate our bodies to confront questions of gender, sexuality, and autonomy, thereby enacting modes of change?
Ooh. Yeah, good question. I never set out to shock anyone with my performance. It came out of me really naturally. It surely was very defiant. My performances are often very fleshy. They're flesh riots. I started out mingling ideas of burlesque and strip and cabaret together. And what I've found as my practice has been very well supported, especially by the queer community, and I've become, able to infiltrate different environments. I found that people are up for it already. They're already there, and so these spaces of liveness that can be created through art and party are these temporary communities that are political space as well. And what they do, which is a very ancient thing, they galvanize us as bodies that can go out stronger and softer in the world.
What do you do on stage to confront people?
Well, yeah, it's like what confronts people. I think what happens, to be explicit, I puppeteer. I do an opening number where I puppeteer my vulva and lip sync while singing Minnie Riperton's "Loving You" with eyes on my backside. And
I didn't expect that answer.
That's one thing I do. But I also do very sincere performance poetry and beautiful dancing and lots of different things all smashed together. People aren't as uptight as you expect. They're open.
Okay, that's good. Let's go to the next question. It's related, actually. It's from Tyler Gashevsky.
Yes, my question is directed to Emma. Why is it that we as a society must look at any kind of sex with a kink as taboo? And what can we do to change that conversation and make us more a sex-positive society?
Yeah. Oh, I just said people are open. They're up for it. But they are also uptight. Like, I think it's the language within media and the way that sex and also death, as I have learned really recently, like grief and sex and death have become sanitized and controlled. It's a way of controlling people. So things that are taboo, which challenge normativity, become dangerous, and they become contagions within that sphere that has been manufactured. So I think more listening to stories of difference, more playing. I believe pleasure is a radical act, and confronting shame where we see it and sticking up for people and all of their weirdness. It's beautiful that we're all so different. It's beautiful. The only problem is when we harm others.
Nikki, I'm going to bring you in on this, and Chuck, obviously, because he's waving at me. Okay, Chuck, you go first.
I was just curious, is there a risk in removing the taboo nature of these things, though? Couldn't part of I guess, the thrill or the titillation, whatever, be based around the fact that there is the intellectual knowledge that the rest of society is uncomfortable or discomforted by this. And I'm a pretty conservative person, not politically, but like as a person, you know. So I don't necessarily understand.
Chuck, when you say the rest of society, it's hard to define, isn't it? Because we know that from the vast numbers of people that are accessing pornography, that there must be that the society isn't quite as straight as it looks.
Oh, of course, but I wonder, even within that confined world, if this is part of it. The idea that my interest or my sexual identity, wherever it is contradicted by the rest of culture, and that is that part of it, or is that
it depends what we mean by
idea?
taboo.
Yeah.
You know, we just got marriage equality for queers last year. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like I understand what you're saying about making the sacred profane thing, like it loses its magic. But in speaking about taboo, I guess I'm more interested in the liberation for all bodies. Like, we can still have our dungeons and our play and all of that mystery, but I mean, just there is so much shame and sex panic, and the way that we are educating kids around sex isn't right. You know, look at how we have these huge issues with men and violence.
Let me go to, we actually have a sex educator on the panel, so Nikki, I think you've got a chance to educate us.
I really feel that we have a linear model when we look at sex that's really influenced by religion. You know, boy meets girl, boy, girl get married, have sex, procreate. You know, we are still struggling to even encourage women to be sexual outside of monogamy. You know, in Australia, our own health system actually says to a heterosexual woman that they should get tested before each new partner. What does that say about our attitudes to what we're saying to young girls? You can be in relationships that are monogamous and you can be at one at a time. We're still that society. So it's great when we see people speaking about sex and people being open about sex, because it starts us to have these conversations where, you know, maybe some girl looking at this tonight goes, you know what, yeah, I can be open with my sexuality and I am allowed to have multiple partners. Why is it that I live in this society that tells me otherwise? I think when we look at taboos in kink, I do agree with you that there are certain things that are sexually enticing because they're forbidden. And I feel like it is a little bit different to what MMA is talking about, that we need this liberation. We need people to be able to be accepted for whoever they want to be and how they want to identify. As long as they're being true to themselves and they're not being harmful to anybody else, I don't have a problem with it. And that's where we need to start encouraging people to say, you don't have to be in this linear model. What do you want to be? What do you want to desire? But I feel like it is very different to looking at taboos in general, because part of the fun of taboos is that they're taboo and they're off bounds.
Toby, what do you think? You knew I was going to ask you that, didn't you?
Well, I mean, ever since we ate the forbidden fruit, you know, I think that gave us a much more exciting life. So I'm not worried about Chuck's fear that if we taste these interesting places, that it will actually spoil them for us. In fact, life is much more exciting.
All right, let's move on to other exciting topics. And we've got a question from Sean Hasselback. Thanks, Sean.
So in 1930, economist John Maynard Keynes predicted that by now we'd be working 15-hour weeks due to productivity gains from technological advances. And so far we've seen that humans tend to reinvest this into economic growth rather than personal well-being. So with this in mind, as AI enables jobs to be replaced by computers, what measures do we need to be taking to ensure that we contain the wealth gap and that doesn't explode into mass unemployment, and we can take advantage of the potential productivity gains so that we can all be sitting on a beach drinking cocktails served to us by robot waiters?
Now, Toby, I think we're in your territory now.
We are. Well, I think the first measure we need to do is start having this particular conversation. I think it's probably the most important conversation that we should be having as a society. It's not a conversation that people like myself should be controlling. It's a conversation that all of you should be having, to think about, well, what is the sort of society we want to wake up, what's the sort of society that we want our children to have, and how do we ensure that the benefits are shared around? Because, quite frankly, they're not being shared around. If you look at many measures productivity's increased, but median wages in real terms have not been increasing. And the very rich are getting much richer, the 1% are getting much richer, but many of the rest of us are being left behind.
So is artificial intelligence going to accelerate that, or is it actually going to take jobs away from middle-class people?
Unfortunately, if we do nothing, it will accelerate it, will amplify the differences. But it also has the potential to generate the wealth to do all the repetitive things for us. So if we decided, and it's worth pointing out, there are experiments underway, companies in New Zealand, I was reading about today about companies in the United Kingdom that are starting, for example, with a 4-day week and discovering that people are just as productive if you get them to work 32 hours a week, and they squeeze more work and they're happier, and you can pay them still the same amount of money. I mean, these are about making the right choices so that all of us share the benefits.
Now, on the other side of the jobs equation with artificial intelligence, you've got corporations now who are building machines that artificial intelligent machines that will interview job applicants. First of all, they screen the applicants. They take a select few, and then the machines, interview that few to produce the small group that get interviewed by humans. Now, they do that with facial recognition technology. So if you show fear or deception, you're out. Yeah, that's the kind of world we're facing, where machines choose who gets a job.
That's the sort of world we're letting corporations take us to. We don't have to let them do that. We can decide that that is unacceptable, that we should always have a human. We know that that sort of software, at least today, is biased. You can't recognize black people as well as you can white people with such facial recognition software. And we can decide that that's not the sort of thing, that's decisions that we should give to machines, because machines are going to be just as biased. We have been sold, I'm afraid, a lie by the last 20 years by the tech companies that algorithms are not biased. Algorithms can be as biased as humans. In fact, they can be more biased than humans, because they can be trained on historical data, and data that is historical is by its very nature is going to have the biases that our society has. So we have to think very carefully about how the technology can be used to improve our lives and where it should not be used, because it's going to make our lives worse. It's not going to be the fair society
who's going to stop companies using what now already exists, this technology to choose job applicants? It's working now. It's happening now in the United States. It will happen here in Australia.
Well, there's lots of things that can do. I mean, governments can help do this. Employees can help do this. I mean, on Friday, I happened to be in the Google offices giving a talk about AI and ethics at 11 o'clock when they had the Google walkout, and I proudly walked out with those people in support of how the management was not dealing with sexual harassment and Me Too in that corporation. Employees can do it, and I think maybe we have to think about reforming corporations. It's worth remembering that the corporation was an invention of the Industrial Revolution. It was a structure that we invented. It's a completely artificial structure that allows us to benefit from the technologies and the implementations of the technologies, and take risk, and it's been wonderful. But equally, we now seem to be with corporations that are acting that are not in line with the public good, and that maybe we have to think about corporations that are called into line so that they do act more in line with the public good.
Chuck, here's another one. I mean, so what do you think about this?
Well, first of all, it's an interesting question always, because, when politicians always, trying to be reelected, or, they'll mention like the unemployment's down, it was 11% and now it's 9%. I mean, isn't kind of the social goal that unemployment goes to 100%? I mean, I can't be the first person who's made this joke. That seems like the idea thing that will get somewhere where no one's working ever, and we're just sort of mingling around, being like, oh, remember the old days when we went to work, and
work is the only truly obscene four-letter word.
I can't think of anything worse. I love working. I find meaning in
if you love it,
social
it's not
engagement
work.
of work.
It's not work then. If you love it, that's why they always say, find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. That's true. If you love it, you're not working. Working is all the other things, like, you got to move that concrete from there to here, and you got to, make the food and harvest the ground. That's the stuff. Poof, gone. That would be a great world.
But it's about creating meaningful conditions for work. I'm proud to admit, I was still waitressing less than 10 years ago as my full-time job, as I was trying to make a career in the arts. And
you miss that?
And waitressing was really backbreaking, really difficult physical work. But it was social. I enjoyed the company of the people I worked with. I was in a situation that was I was working in the UK, it was very low paid, it was very difficult, there were very few rights and protections. But at the same time, there's a structure to work that gives us reason to engage with people. people. And we've got to get back to the idea of the workplace as a site of community and empowerment and agency. And in these discussions, and I think Toby nails it when he talks about we approach automation or digitisation as a fait accompli. We live in a democracy. We live in a wonderful democracy in Australia where we have universal voting, where the obligation on the government is to provide access to the ballot box for every single citizen of this country. And that is a wonderful thing that we should defend with everything we have. We can form unions, we can form community groups, we can form political organisations unhindered, and we can use that experience of organisation, whether it's in the workplace or the community or the home, the family, religious institutions, to actually determine what regulatory frameworks will look like that can govern the values that we think are important to us as a community. And at no point should we ever forget how absolutely crucial that is. And when we talk about
dystopias, an election campaign now.
But when we talk about dystopias, Tony, we're talking about dystopias an end vision of an absence of democracy. That's really what they are. Whether it's 1984, whether it's Brave New World, if it's a society of the oppression of pain or the oppression of pleasure, all of these things, Handmaid's Tale, they're about those rights being taken away. If we're scared of robots, let's legislate their use. If we're scared of AI, let's legislate it. If we're worried about biases, let's create a regulatory framework. We're not actually disempowered.
I just want to ask Chuck something. Is your attitude to work based on... Oh, okay, look, you can give her a round of applause, that's just fine. Is your attitude to work sort of based on the fact that someone paid you to watch television and look at social media and write books and just basically have a chilled life?
I don't feel like I work as a profession. It doesn't seem that way to me. I mean, to me, writing and kind of living a kind of life of the mind or whatever, that's what I'd be doing in my free time if I had some other job.
You wouldn't have anything to write about if the world was doing nothing.
Well, work isn't everything. I mean, there's other things going on, you know. It's like, to me, the work part is, you know, publicizing books and doing all these things. You know, that is the part that's work. The creative part is something that I have the privilege to do, you know. I mean, I'm kind of joking when I say unemployment should be 100%, but yet, you know, I remember a lot of the people that I grew up with, or, you know, they did not look at their job as a fulfilling extension of their life. It was something they had to do, and then they couldn't wait till it was done. And I think if you told those people you could live a life where the thing you start doing at 6 is actually what you do all day, I think they would be, let's hear about these robots, you know, it's like, let's get into this, you know.
Okay, let's move on. We've got another question on bad robots. It's from Clara von Dinklage.
Hi, this question is mainly directed towards Toby Walsh. You write about autonomous weapons, and I'm wondering who would be held accountable for these so-called killer robots should they act in unintended ways. If it were to do something that could constitute a war crime, for example, would we try the person who programs the robot itself, or someone else?
Thank you. The one good answer to the question is it's not the robot, right? A robot is a machine. It has no moral character. It can't. It has no conscience. It can't suffer pain. We can't punish it. So the robot is the one thing that we cannot. So is it the person who programmed it? Is it the person who turned it on? And then to complicate the answer even further, we are increasingly building machines that learn from their environment. And so maybe someone exposed it to some bad data, and now it's been hacked to behave in a way that was unintended. So we don't have good answers, and that's one reason why we don't want to have autonomous weapons, is because there is no one accountable.
Autonomous weapons are self-targeting.
Yes.
They will go out there. Their programs will tell them this person is the enemy and they'll kill that person.
They will identify, track and target without any human involved. And that is unfortunately going to be the future of warfare unless we make a decision.
The Pentagon's already gone a fair way down this track. You imagine the Chinese, the Russians are doing the same.
There is an arms race to develop these sorts of weapons. And excuse me. I'm pleased to say, though, the United Nations is discussing whether we should preemptively ban such technologies. We have banned chemical weapons, biological weapons, even today nuclear weapons.
They should be in the same category?
I believe that, and not just I believe them, thousands of my colleagues, many of my colleagues working in AI, think this would be a terrible revolution, a step change in the speed, efficiency, accuracy of warfare. And we have a moment, a small window of opportunity to decide, let's not use this in war, because there are some times where we decide some technology is just so morally repugnant that we don't want to use them. We decided that with chemical weapons, we've decided that with biological weapons, and I hope, very much hope, that eventually we will, in the near future, decide that with autonomous weapons.
We've got time for one last question. It comes from Mark Panassian.
Hi. In today's world with multiple dating apps like Tinder and millisecond decisions based on someone's picture, if you like them or not, how do you think that's impacting our nature at the moment and connecting with people at a deeper level?
MMA, what do you think about this? Let's talk about dating apps and
with
so on.
With a face like this. Yeah. I think...
Would you put that face on a dating app?
No. You've got to come see a show. In my shows, we all make love. And I think that when I've thought about this business, I think that it lives in the realm of capitalism, and a very dangerous capitalism that greeds beyond the needs of the community, and those faces just become things that we consume. Yeah.
Dan, what do you think?
I think the funniest thing about Tinder is because it matches you with somebody who is like you. They like the things that you like, and they have the friends that you have. And at some point, you end up dating somebody who has all the things you don't like about yourself as well. And Tinder's great for meeting artistic collaborators and political comrades, and not necessarily a great way of forming partnerships, although some people manage it. But that was certainly my experience. I was like, oh my God, everybody's just like me. And it was genuinely terrifying. And then I did what, I was probably destined to do, and met the love of my life in a loading zone at a CFMEU party. Highly recommend it.
Chuck?
Well, I missed that whole world. That came to existence after I was married. I know lots of people who are involved with it. They all are addicted to it and hate it. Universally, every one of them. They can't stop doing it, and they talk about how awful it is. They talk about how dehumanizing it is, how frustrating it is, how weird it is, and how alienating it is. And then they start looking at it again, and they go, do you want to do this? It's really fun to do someone else's. You're like, this is all you do? And you ask them, like, well, what's going to happen? And they're like, oh, nothing. Nothing's going to happen. I was like, why am I doing it then? And it's like, you can just do it, So you look at something that is like, it's giving short-term pleasure, and it's addictive, and it makes someone feel terrible.
It should be banned.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Regulated.
What do you think? That's like describing heroin, kind of, or something. It's like these are the qualities. So I'm glad I missed it. Although I wonder if maybe in some ways it would have been easier. I don't know.
Toby, and the algorithms obviously are key.
Well, unfortunately, again, yes, I'm afraid to say that the algorithms are matching you with the wrong sorts of people, and not.
People like myself.
Going for that dopamine hit and not actually going for long-term love. And so we have to be very careful how we let algorithms into our lives. Again,
and machines.
Machines into our lives.
Yeah. Nikki?
Okay. So dating apps for me is we've got positives and negatives. Right? Now we look at the negatives, and we're becoming a society that is fast-paced and disposable. You don't give someone a chance. That could be a great person, and you're swiping the wrong way. You don't get to meet them. You don't get to interact and explore chemistry. But then you have a look on the other side of things, and we can now date from the comfort of our homes. Let's have a look at what it's done for women. We can now be in control of dating. We used to have to go out to the local bar and wait to be hit on, or get the courage to go up and talk to somebody. Now you can sit at home and you actually have control over being able to have those interactions. So I think with anything in technology, especially when we're looking at the relationship sex side of things, we're going to see those positives and negatives. I think what's important is that we continue to have the conversations around, well, how do you use these dating apps to actually connect more meaningful relationships? Use them like a virtual bar. If somebody interests you and you think, I just want to talk to that person further, not necessarily is this going to be my husband or my wife, but is there something about that person I think would make an interesting conversation? Then engage in that conversation.
You're talking about sticking your toe in the bath? I'm trying to get the bath analogy there.
Wait, in the bar, not in the bar.
Oh, the bar.
The bar. I don't know whoever went into a bar.
I totally misheard that. I was thinking a virtual bath.
You're thinking of a test bath. Give that person a chance. And obviously you have to be careful that you're being safe and you're meeting in public and somebody knows where you are.
Pretty soon you'll be able to wear glasses with facial recognition technology and read everything about them before you even say a word.
See, I don't like that. I think you need to get to know the person. Let them tell you their story. but go from that transference of online to meeting them in person and then seeing if that chemistry is there.
Okay, women empowering themselves, probably a good place to end this discussion. That's all we have time for tonight. Please thank our panel, Chuck Klosterman, Nikki Goldstein, Van Badham, Emma Mae Gibson and Toby Walsh. Thank you very much. And our special thanks to the Ethics Centre, the University of New South Wales and the wonderful Roundhouse. You can continue the discussion with Q&A Extra on News Radio and Facebook Live, where Tracy Holmes will be joined by Ethics Centre Director Simon Longstaff, the co-founder of Fodi. Now, this Thursday we have a special Q&A at 8 p.m. with special guest Malcolm Turnbull. Just 3 months ago, he was Australia's elected Prime Minister and making ground in the polls. Now, in his first major media appearance, Malcolm Turnbull will face your questions. Why was he toppled? What did he achieve and where did he fail? That's 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time this Thursday on ABC TV, News, ABC News, News Radio and iView. Don't miss it. Until Thursday, 8 p.m. Good night.